In the shadow of the Cold War, a sinister alliance known as Operation Condor was forged in South America, marking one of the darkest chapters in the continent's history. This clandestine consortium of right-wing military dictatorships initiated a campaign of state-sponsored terror that transcended national borders. The ideological battleground of the Cold War had firmly extended into Latin America, creating a fertile environment for extreme anti-communist measures. Fearing the spread of leftist movements, several regimes decided that coordinated, brutal force was their only viable solution. The formal inception of Operation Condor took place at a secret meeting in Santiago, Chile, on November 25, 1975. It was hosted by Manuel Contreras, the head of Chile's notorious secret police, the DINA, under dictator Augusto Pinochet. The founding members were the intelligence services of the dictatorships in Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Brazil, another major military power in the region, officially joined the pact in 1976, significantly expanding its operational reach. Later, Peru and Ecuador also participated, though their involvement was more sporadic and on the periphery of the core group. The fundamental goal of Condor was the systematic elimination of political dissidents, left-wing activists, and any individual deemed subversive. This created a continent-wide hunting ground, where national sovereignty offered no protection to those targeted. Operation Condor was divided into 3 phases of escalating severity and coordination. Phase 1 involved the creation of a centralized intelligence database, sharing information on activists, exiles, and suspected militants. A special encrypted communication system, known as Condortel, was established to facilitate this rapid exchange of data. Phase 2 moved from intelligence sharing to active operations, where agents from one member country could operate within another's territory. This allowed Chilean agents, for example, to abduct a Chilean exile living in Buenos Aires with the full cooperation of Argentine forces. Phase 3 was the most audacious, involving the formation of special teams to conduct assassinations of high-profile targets outside of Latin America. These operations were planned for cities like Paris, Lisbon, Rome, and even Washington, D.C. The victims of Condor were numerous and varied, including students, union leaders, journalists, priests, and politicians. The term desaparecido, or the disappeared, became tragically common throughout the continent. People would be abducted from their homes, workplaces, or off the street, never to be seen again by their families. Secret detention centers and torture camps were established, hidden within military bases or innocuous-looking properties. Places like Villa Grimaldi in Chile and the Navy School of Mechanics, SMA, in Argentina became infamous sites of unimaginable cruelty. The methods of torture were systematic and designed to break the human spirit before ending a life. Many of the disappeared were eventually murdered, their bodies disposed of in ways that would prevent identification. The infamous death flights involved drugging victims and dropping them from airplanes into the Atlantic Ocean or the Rio de la Plata. One of the most notorious cases was the assassination of former Chilean General Carlos Prats and his wife, Sofia Cuthbert. Prats, a vocal opponent of Pinochet, was killed by a car bomb in Buenos Aires in September 1974, an early precursor to Condor's methods. Another high-profile assassination was that of Orlando Letelier, a former Chilean ambassador to the United States. Letelier was killed by a car bomb on Sheridan Circle in Washington, D.C. on September 21, 1976. His American colleague, Ronnie Moffett, was also killed in the blast, bringing the terror of Condor directly to the U.S. Capital. The United States' role in Operation Condor remains a subject of intense debate and scrutiny. Declassified documents have confirmed that the CIA and other U.S. agencies were aware of the existence and nature of Condor. U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger was briefed on the cross-border assassination plans. While some U.S. officials expressed concern, the overarching policy of supporting anti-communist allies often led to a blind eye being turned. The U.S. provided financial aid, military equipment, and training to the very regimes that were the architects of Condor. This support was often framed as necessary for hemispheric security in the context of the Cold War. For years, the full extent of Operation Condor was a secret, known only to its perpetrators and whispered about by its victims. The truth began to emerge, thanks to the tireless work of human rights activists and investigative journalists. A pivotal breakthrough occurred in December 1992 in Paraguay. Acting on a tip, Judge José Fernández and educator Martín Almada discovered a massive, hidden cache of documents in a police station in Lambaré, a suburb of Asunción. This trove, which became known as the Archives of Terror, contained hundreds of thousands of pages of documents. The archives detailed the abduction, torture, and murder of thousands of individuals by Paraguayan security forces and their Condor allies. It provided irrefutable proof of the coordinated nature of the operation, listing victims and perpetrators by name. The discovery of the Archives of Terror sent shockwaves across the world and became a cornerstone for future legal proceedings. With the fall of the dictatorships in the 1980s and 1990s, the slow and arduous process of seeking justice began. Amnesty laws, passed by the outgoing military regimes to protect themselves, presented significant obstacles. However, persistent efforts by victims' families and human rights lawyers began to chip away at this impunity. Trials were held in Argentina, Chile, and other countries, as well as in Europe, under the principle of universal jurisdiction. High-ranking officials, once considered untouchable, were finally brought before a judge to answer for their crimes. Augusto Pinochet himself was arrested in London in 1998, a landmark moment in the fight against impunity for heads of state. In 2016, an Argentine court delivered a historic verdict, convicting 15 former military officials for their roles in Operation Condor. The court officially recognized Condor as a criminal conspiracy to kidnap and forcibly disappear people across borders. The legacy of Operation Condor is a deep scar on the collective memory of South America. It represents the terrifying capacity of states to turn against their own citizens in the name of ideology. The generation of activists, artists, and intellectuals that was decimated has left a void that is still felt today. The children of the disappeared, many of whom were born in captivity and illegally adopted by military families, continue to search for their true identities. Organizations like the Grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo have worked relentlessly to identify these stolen children using DNA evidence. The history of Operation Condor serves as a permanent warning about the dangers of authoritarianism and the erosion of human rights. It underscores the importance of international cooperation in upholding justice, rather than in perpetrating terror. The secret war may be over, but for the thousands of families affected, the search for truth and closure is a battle that never ends. The political climate of the 1960s and early 1970s saw a rise in left-wing guerrilla movements and popular socialist sentiment across the region. This was perceived as a direct threat by the traditional economic elites and the military establishments. The 1973 coup in Chile, which overthrew the democratically elected socialist president Salvador Allende, was a key turning point. The Condor system was chillingly bureaucratic, with detailed records kept on targets. Agents often used Ford Falcons without license plates, a vehicle that became synonymous with fear and abduction. The psychological impact on society was profound. creating a pervasive culture of silence and fear. Speaking out against the government could lead to the disappearance of not just one person, but their entire family. The case of the two Carmelos highlighted the absurdity and brutality of the system. Two Uruguayan men, both named Carmelo, were targeted. One, a political activist, the other completely apolitical. Condor operatives, in their blind hunt, abducted and murdered both of them. The Catholic Church, in some instances, played a complex role, with some priests and nuns opposing the regimes and paying the ultimate price. Others within the church hierarchy remained silent or were openly supportive of the military governments. The discovery of the body of former Bolivian President Juan José Torres in 1976 was another stark warning. He had been living in exile in Buenos Aires when he was kidnapped and assassinated by a Condor death squad. The operation's name, Condor, was a symbolic choice, representing a bird of prey that soars over the Andes, saying everything. It reflected the regime's view of themselves as guardians watching over the continent, purging it of impurities. The economic policies implemented by these dictatorships, often crafted by the Chicago Boys, involved neoliberal reforms. These policies led to deindustrialization and increased inequality, which were enforced by the brutal repression of labor unions. The terror was not random. It was a calculated tool of political and economic control. The end of the Cold War and the subsequent declassification of U.S. documents provided further, crucial evidence. These files corroborated the testimonies of survivors and the findings from the archives of terror. Memorials and museums now stand where torture centers once operated, ensuring that future generations do not forget. The phrase "Nunca Más," never again, became the rallying cry for human rights movements across Latin America. This hidden war, fought in the shadows, reshaped the political landscape of an entire continent. Its history is a complex tapestry of political ideology, international complicity, and immense human suffering. The fight for full accountability continues, as many perpetrators were never brought to justice. Yet, the resilience of the survivors and the families of the victims has ensured that the truth of Operation Condor was not buried with its victims. The initial intelligence sharing was formalized under the name Tiseo, a reference to the Greek hero who navigated the labyrinth. This network allowed intelligence chiefs to track dissidents who fled from one country to another, believing they had found safety. The Automotores Orletti Garage in Buenos Aires was a key clandestine detention center for non-Argentine victims of Condor. Survivors described it as a place of constant horror, where people from different nations were held and tortured together. The collaboration was so deep that Paraguayan officials were present at interrogations in Argentina, and vice versa. Case of Wilson Ferreira Aldunat, a prominent Uruguayan politician, showed the reach of Condor's political targeting. Argentine forces, at the request of Uruguay, attempted to kidnap him, but he was tipped off and escaped. However, two other Uruguayan exiles, Selma Michelini and Hector Gutierrez Ruiz, were abducted and murdered in his stead. This event demonstrated that no one, no matter how prominent, was safe from the Condor's reach. The psychological warfare component of Condor aimed to sow paranoia and distrust within leftist movements. They spread disinformation and planted rumors to turn groups against each other. The terror was not just physical, but also mental, designed to dismantle resistance from the inside out. The return to democracy was a slow, uneven process across the continent. Argentina's disastrous Falklands War in 1982 discredited the military junta and hastened its collapse. In Chile, Pinochet lost the plebiscite in 1988 that was designed to extend his rule, paving the way for elections. Each nation had to confront its past in its own way, a process that continues to this day. The archives revealed that at least 50,000 people were murdered within the Condor framework. Around 30,000 were forcibly disappeared, their fates remaining unknown to their families. An estimated 400,000 people were imprisoned and politically persecuted during this period. The sheer scale of the repression was staggering, a coordinated effort to reshape society. The operation also involved the systematic theft of babies born to mothers in captivity. These infants were then given to families with connections to the military regime, their identities erased. The search for these stolen grandchildren has become a multi-generational quest for truth and reunion. Grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo have successfully identified over 130 of these individuals. Each reunion is a victory against the silence and lies of the dictatorship. The story of Operation Condor is a testament to the darkness that can arise when power goes unchecked. It also highlights the incredible courage of those who fought for human rights in the face of overwhelming terror. The memory of the disappeared lives on in the struggle for justice. Their stories are now part of the historical record, a permanent indictment of the regimes that murdered them. The Condor's shadow has receded, but the duty to remember remains. The collaboration extended to financial institutions that helped launder money for the regimes. European intelligence agencies were also aware of Condor's activities on their soil. Italian government, for instance, investigated attempts by Chilean agents to target exiles in Rome. The web of complicity was vast, making justice a complex international puzzle. Many ex-agents and torturers assimilated back into civilian life after the fall of the dictatorships. Identifying them and gathering evidence decades later proved to be a monumental task for prosecutors. The concept of transitional justice was developed to handle the legal and moral challenges of this period. It involved truth commissions, reparations for victims, and institutional reforms alongside criminal trials. The goal was not just punishment, but also to build a national consensus around the truth of what happened. This process helps to strengthen democratic institutions and prevent a recurrence of such atrocities. The art and music produced in exile became a form of resistance and a way of preserving cultural memory. These cultural artifacts are now vital documents of the era, expressing the pain and hope of a displaced generation. The hidden truth of Operation Condor is a stark reminder that vigilance is the eternal price of freedom.